Welcome to Zorkbid123's guide on how to get at least 100 billion in damage to world boss number 3, Xanadus, in King's Raid. Xanadus is the hardest world boss to do 100 billion in damage to. If you were to fight Xanadus for 6 days in a row, which is how long she appears, twice a day, which is the maximum number of times you can fight her per day, and you got 100 billion in damage each time, you would probably be ranked, if you're in the American server like me, at number 1,000 or higher, and in the whole world, you'd probably be ranked higher than number 10,000. So that's a pretty decent rank. And if you did the same amount of damage to the other two world bosses, you would actually not get as high of a rank, meaning that it's harder to do 100 billion in damage to this world boss. However, if you look at the highest scores against Xanadus versus the highest scores against the other two world bosses, you'll see that at least when it comes to, like, say, the top person in the world, they actually score much higher than people do against the other two world bosses. But for most people, Xanadus is harder to score a high amount of damage on. So why is that? Well, one reason is with Xanadus you only have 3.5 minutes to fight her, whereas with the other two world bosses, you have up to 5.5 minutes. Now, another possible reason for this is because the other two world bosses, they both get stunned, and that's when you can do the most damage to them. Xanadus, on the other hand, never gets stunned. The time you can do the most damage to her is when she does her Nightmare of the Abyss skill, but that is also the time in which she deals the most damage, so she's the most vulnerable only when she is also the most dangerous. So taking a look at Xanadus, the Abysmal Goddess, it does say that when she's in her Abyss Nightmare mode, she takes the most damage, presenting a perfect opportunity for you to focus fire. It also points out that she neutralizes one hero. Now, the one hero that she neutralizes is going to be your most tankish hero. So she also talks about her skills, Invitation to the Abyss. That's what I was talking about. It charms one enemy and deals magic damage to the target. And this enemy is always going to be the most tankish enemy. Withdrawing it from the battle for 8 seconds. Withdrawn target cannot perform any action or be targeted. Hit enemy has its damage reduced. It also talks about the Abysmal Nightmare. It also should be noted that she always fights alongside 2 crystals, so she's never really alone. And so for that reason, the artifact, the Blessing of the Earth, which increases your attack by 40% when there is only one enemy, is not really useful against her, since you're always going to be against more than one enemy when fighting her. Also, since she does isolate your most tankish character, your second most tankish character becomes pretty important and sort of acts as a tank. The most tankish characters in this game are knights, but the second most tankish type of character are warriors. During her Abysmal Nightmare, she will heal herself, and every time she heals herself, she permanently reduces the amount of damage she takes. So for that reason, it's very important to have heroes that can reduce her heal rate. That's one of the main reasons why I'm using Mora as a tank, because Mora can actually reduce heal rate. The Transcendence perks that I'm using for Mora for this battle are relatively offensive ones. You can build Mora relatively offensively. That's why I'm using Attack Up, Experience Fighter, Monster Hunting, her S4 Dark, which greatly increases the amount of magic damage the target takes, and her Tier 5 Light and Dark. However, the gear that I'm using on Mora has primarily defensive substats. I'm also using Syria. Syria is a character that is used quite a lot against World Boss number 3 because her S3, her skill 3, can really reduce the World Boss's heal rate. So you want to use her skill 3 right as Xanadus goes into using the Nightmare of the Abyss skill, and you pretty much have to use Syria manually because her S3 has a very long cooldown, and if you use her automatically, you may not get the chance to use her S3 when you actually need it. Also, I do use pretty defensive gear for Syria in this, and that's because, like I said before, Xanadus will isolate your main tank, which in this case is Mora. So Syria sort of becomes my tank, and Syria, I find, will often be killed too quickly unless I give her very defensive gear. I'm also using the Angry Pumpkin artifact, which reduces the damage she takes by 10% and increases the damage she gives by 10%. I'm also using 2 of her unique treasures, including Enlightening Candlelight, which is probably the most important unique treasure for this particular battle. I'm using Maryann as my main DPS in this battle. As you can see, I do have a 4-star unique weapon for Maryann. Some people say that Lauda is actually the best magic DPS character in the game right now, and she might actually be a better choice than Maryann. I do have Lauda, but I haven't built her up yet. She is still at tier 4, and she only has a 2-star unique weapon, so right now Maryann, for me at least, is still the better choice, but Lauda might be a better choice overall. I'm also using Shyah. Shyah is a healer and buffer character that is useful pretty much in all 3 world boss battles. Her skills do have long cooldown times, and the main thing that can lower her cooldown times is her unique weapon. I have a 4-star unique weapon for her. I did get quite lucky on upgrading the unique weapon in her case. The Watch artifact helps as well. Because of her longer cooldowns, a lot of people give her a lot of CC resist, and this is especially important if you have a unique weapon for her with 3 stars or less. But I find that even at 4 stars, it's good to have a good amount of CC resist. I don't give her 100% CC resist like I used to when I had a lower star unique weapon. I still keep her CC resist between 50% and 90%. Once you have a 4-star or higher unique weapon with her, you can focus more on attack speed. Attack speed is the stat that will really scale up more so than attack. For Shyah, attack speed is more important than attack. Next character I'm using is Annette. Annette is a healer, but she is also able to cleanse the entire party of negative effects and boost everyone's CC resistance. I'm told by some people that if you have Shyah, especially with a 4 or 5-star unique weapon, you don't need to use Annette, but I find that at least against Xanadus, whenever I try to take out Annette, my damage that I do to Xanadus goes way down, so I find that Annette is still useful, even though I'm also using Shyah. Annette also does a decent amount of DPS herself. I'm also using Krisha. Part of the reason why I first got Krisha was I happened to get 3 of her unique treasures through random tickets, so I decided to get her when I saw her in the inn. Like Syria, her S3 will greatly reduce the healing rate for Xanadus, so just like Syria's S3, you want to use her S3 right as Xanadus does the Abysmal Nightmare. And just like Syria, you pretty much have to use Krisha manually because her S3 has a long cooldown, and if you don't do it manually, you may not have her S3 available when you need it. I'm also using May. May is the only NPC character I'm using against Xanadus, and I like May quite a lot. She is also a healer that acts as a buffer. For her Transcendent skills, you'll notice I'm using her S1 Dark rather than her S1 Light. Her S1 Dark allows her S1 to stack 8 times rather than 5 times. Her S1 Light prevents her S1 from being dispelled. However, that's useful for enemies that can dispel positive effects. But Xanadus actually does not dispel her S1, so it's better to go with S1 Dark when fighting Xanadus. I also use her S4 Dark, and that greatly increases the damage that magic teams can do. It increases magic damage by 25%. If you have physical heroes, it's better to go with her S4 Light, but since I'm using magic heroes in this battle, her S4 Dark is the way to go. And finally, I am using Lavrole. Now, Lavrole is a healer, and yes, if you count Annette, that means that I'm actually using 4 different healers. Lavrole, however, is not really a very powerful healer, but what she does do is she greatly augments your main DPS character. She increases their attack, and her S2 also will increase their critical damage by as much critical damage as Lavrole has, so for that reason, I have given her quite a lot of critical damage. Her critical damage is currently at 250%. It might be worth it to give her even more critical damage than that, but either way, giving Lavrole a lot of critical damage is a good idea. To further boost the attack of my main DPS, I have the Abysmal Crown equipped. So, without further ado, let's get into the battle. For some reason, I have recently found that fighting this world boss at 1.5 speed seems to improve my score, but that could just be a coincidence. So as you can see, she's got those two crystals, the blue one and the red one in front, and those are the two crystals that she always fights with. That slapping motion that she does with her hands and her wings is not an attack to be underestimated. It's not her most powerful attack, but she can still do a lot of damage with that attack. So, as you can see, I've got Shyah and Syria on manual. And that's so... Okay, so here she goes into her Nightmare of the Abyss. So I'm going to use Shyah's S3 and Syria's S3. Now, during the Nightmare of the Abyss, after you use Syria's S3, you can also use her S1 and S2, but with Shyah, when you use her S3, you don't want to use any of her other skills until after the Nightmare of the Abyss is over, and that's because if you use one of her other skills, the effect that her green light skill, which is her S3 skill, has, will turn off. And so here, we're going to once again do the Nightmare of the Abyss. And this is when you can do the most damage to her, but when those eyeballs open up, but also when you can take the most damage. So we're doing pretty well. You'll notice I actually have Shyah on auto. A lot of people like to use Shyah manually. I'm using her on auto mainly because, well, I have at least 2 characters that I am controlling manually. And I actually am manually overriding the auto sometimes on Shyah. If you want to use Shyah manually, it's a good idea to focus on her S2 and S3 as much as possible, but then use her S1 skill when you need healing. That's probably her most powerful healing skill. So this is the 3rd time she's doing the Nightmare of the Abyss, and at the end of it, we have about 63 billion in damage. So that's pretty good. We're moving along nicely. And she has already killed Syria. This is why I give Syria quite a lot of defensive substats in her gear, because Syria sort of has to act as my main tank. And Syria is often the first one to be killed, at least for me. Okay, so once again, we're doing the Nightmare of the Abyss. Or she's doing it, I should say. And I'm not able to suppress it with Syria's S3, but I'm able to suppress her heal rate with Shyah's S3. And we're about to surpass the 100 billion mark. There, we did it. With about 30 seconds to go. So, we successfully passed the 100 billion mark. It looks like she's going to kill most of my characters. But what really matters is, and this is the last time we can do the Nightmare of the Abyss, but what really matters is the score you get. And so I just did score a total of, let's see, with 2 seconds left, I scored a total of 110 billion and 562 million. So as you can see, that does actually give me a rank of 8,900 in the world, and in the American server, it gives me a rank of 797. Special thanks to my producer, Lena, aka Lollipop, and my associate producer, Jammy Joy. I have a new Patreon perk. If you would like to be credited as a producer on all my videos, you can for $50 or more a month. And if you'd like to be credited as an associate producer, you can for $5 or more per month. Check out my Patreon link in the description if you'd like to contribute. Thanks to everyone for supporting my channel, and if you like this video, go ahead and give it a like. And if you aren't already, subscribe to my channel, click the bell icon for notifications, and together we shall take over the world. You can also catch me on Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and Snapchat at Zorkmid123.